This morning I'm talking with Nick Clare, who is a principal consultant, and Brian Tucker, who is a senior consultant with Ivar Jacobson International, who are sponsors of the Agile Business Conference in October. Nick, you've been involved in one of the largest applications of Agile to a single software product to date, and you specialise in enterprise Agile and lean implementation. Are some organisations still reluctant to adopt Agile? Is it sometimes perceived as a free-for-all and lacking process?
I guess that perception exists in quite a few organisations, yes. There are lots of myths and legends surrounding Agile. You get everything from, kills all known germs, it's the answer to everything, to it's this kind of cowboy's paradise. You get the two extremes. I mean, in truth, I think Agile does touch on everything, does change everything, but really the investment required is in people and process. The rigour and discipline required from Agile comes from within. So in defined processes, we tend to see procedural instructions, a large body of documented process and things, whereas in Agile it's much more about empowering and building trusted professionals. So the engineering discipline comes from within, if you like. So that's what Agile tries to encourage. So if you've got people who are not performing well, there are fewer places left to hide in Agile as well, because it's a whole team contribution, and because you're delivering frequent increments of software, you tend to find out much quicker those who are up to it and those that aren't. So in a sense that it's easier to spot the people that aren't team players in Agile. So we try and create the right behaviours in Agile by creating the right conditions. So we have lightweight essentials. So we'll have some guidelines and basic processes, and even those can vary to some extent in the degree of rigour and how much documentation there is. You can compare DSDM, for instance, at one end and Scrum perhaps at the other end. But all these Agile methods, they all build on catering for the most competent of people rather than the worst. Whereas you tend to find in defined processes perhaps that they tend to cater for the worst kinds of behaviour and try and build things that way. So in Agile we're trying to encourage innovation, creativity and allow variability in the process in order to achieve ultimately the right results. There's just one other sort of angle on that occurs to me actually, on the Agile servant leadership side of things. So we're trying to build leaders who have a vision rather than who are command and control experts. So it's much more about defining what the team achieves rather than how they achieve it. And to do that you have to build up trust. So yes, there is a perception out there that there can be a reluctance to adopt Agile, but I think that's largely due to not really seeing the true nature of Agile.
Mm-hmm. So Brian, how do you persuade people of the benefits of using Agile in organisations that are subject to strict compliance, where there may be some reluctance?
So we have to understand where their reluctance comes from, do a root cause analysis of what those issues are, the perceived problems that they see and face. And then we can illustrate how Agile can address those problems while still giving them the benefits of Agile and Lean, such as early delivery of incremental software.
Mm-hmm. And working in a highly complex project environment, what do you see as the main advantages of an Agile approach? And would you say that Agile can always be used regardless of the level of complexity?
Its advantages for complexity is that it adapts itself to emergent requirements and able to adapt to changes in that complexity. Can it be used everywhere? Well, when there are very understood technology, a well-known set of requirements, then it may be easier just to have a very simple recipe type process to move through. Equally, at the very other end of the spectrum, where you have completely blue sky research, where you don't understand the technology and there are no emerging requirements, then Agile might not give you much benefit there. You just have to keep working at it until something happens. Mm-hmm. But for everything in the middle, and that is a very big middle, yes, Agile can bring you some benefits.
Okay. So Nick, can I ask you, is there one single Agile principle that you consider paramount?
That's an interesting question. I mean, all 12 are pretty important, and you can't really afford to forget any of them or ignore any of them. But I mean, so I suppose you need to be cognizant of them all, but I guess there would be one principle that I would bring out as the one that can infer an awful lot about the Agile way of working, and in fact pretty well covers most of the other principles. So from a sort of academic debate point of view, I think I'd pick that working software is the primary measure of progress. And if we sort of look at that, if you try and look at that in detail, so if working software is the primary measure of progress, you're likely to want to measure that progress often. And you're likely to be producing working software often, therefore. And if you're producing working software often, then you'll be making sure that it's tested software, because that's what working software means after all. And you'll be gathering frequent stakeholder feedback as well to do that. So if you're gathering frequent stakeholder feedback and the working software is tested, then you're going to gain confidence that you're building the right system, and that you're building the system right. And that in turn will motivate developers, inspire them into, or encourage them towards technical excellence. And technical excellence will give you, brings about innovation and therefore competitive advantage. If you look also at the idea of frequent stakeholder feedback and working software, tested software, this will encourage you as well to inspect and adapt your process so that you can produce those even more often. So you've got the concept of continuous integration inferred as well. And then finally, you can look again back at what produce working software often tends to encourage an idea that simplicity is paramount. What is the simplest possible solution that can work in any given circumstance? And as such, architecture tends to emerge rather than being big upfront predefined architecture. So I think if you look at analyse those statements I've just made over the last couple of minutes, and then refer back to the 12 principles, pretty well all of them are covered. So I guess that's why I choose working software as the primary measure of progress.
And would you agree with that, Brian?
I think very much so. And in a lot of circumstances, it's why I find Agile working so well in small startups. Why does it work well in small startups? Because if they don't produce working software at the end of the month, they're going under. The harder problem is to translate that into a business environment where there isn't that sense of fear that's driving on the engineers in order to produce that. There's no chance of them being out of a job at the end of the month. But you need some of that to keep the process running. So getting that instilled in a wider, larger enterprise is quite a challenge.
Okay, well, we'll look forward to your presentation, which is called Agile Development in Highly Regulated Environments, in October. And thank you for your time today.
Thank you.